Hi, my name is Dennis Paulson. I am in the cit-260 Java programming course, and this is my final presentation. On the desktop here, you'll see our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. He's the reason I'm in the course and the reason I'm doing this presentation at this time. With that being said, let's move on to the slideshow. Okay, as I said, my name is Dennis Paulson in the cit-260, and this is my final presentation. First, I'm going to address static and non-static variables. On the left, we have a static variable, and on the right, we have a non-static variable. This is code from our game, and it belongs to the crops class. I've made a quick change just to demonstrate the differences of what these would be and how they would be implemented. On the left, we have a static variable year. It does not belong to an instance of crops when we create crops, but it does belong to the crops class. So every time we create a crops class, we could actually, within that constructor, just implement a counter that is going to change this static variable for all crops. So it would be an easy way to increment a new year every time a crop is created, or every time we loop through a crop harvest year situation in the game. On the right, we have a private integer, or a private int year, that belongs to the instance of the crop. So every time we implement, or excuse me, every time we instantiate or create an instance of crops, then that year variable belongs to that individual instance of the crops. That basically is the difference between the static and non-static. The non-static belongs to the instance of the crops, and the static belongs to the crops class itself, outside and above, beyond any instances of the crops that have been created. The arrays is next. I would like to demonstrate the difference with our code in our game of an array and an array list. It's my understanding that an array it's just basic functionality provided by Java. An array list is part of a collection framework in Java. An array can be a primitive type, or it can be objects. In this case, we have a location array, which is multidimensional. We have two different parameters there, or dimensions of that array. And then we have a name here, and then the beginning of a for loop to loop through each of the dimensions. And then for each of the first dimension, we loop through the rest. So for every x coordinate, or every row, we loop through all the columns, essentially. On the right, an array list is, like I say, it is a part of a collection framework in Java, and so it's basically an array of objects. You can place objects in arrays, not primitive data types, but you can still specify integer, which is just a wrapper, I guess, for an int, which basically is an object and can contain ints, essentially. But like I say, my understanding is preliminary, but that is my understanding of the main differences between array and array list. Looking at the processing times, there's very little difference. Array lists, to my understanding, use the arrays, and they just copy and can increase in size. With arrays, we have to predetermine that, and so that's the difference. And then we use these square brackets, of course, with arrays. And array lists have a set of methods to access their elements and modify those. Let's see, a loop. We're going to talk about how to loop through an array. In this instance, as I mentioned briefly, for each of the x coordinates or rows, we're going to loop through all the y coordinates. And so we use a nested for loop, and there's actually a few nested for loops here, and with some conditional statements. And that's how we create our map. We have characters that will print under certain conditions. We have spaces under certain conditions, and so each of these indexes basically produce a different visual printout to help create our map. And as I demonstrate the game, I'll show how those print out a 5x5 map based on the row and based on the location of and the values of those rows and columns. I have examples here coded from our game of some error handling, exception handling, how to properly throw, propagate, and catch an error, and to handle them in a custom way. On the left, you'll see we have a error view class in which we have a nice friendly error message printed here, which includes a variable that would be returned from a class that would be creating that and throwing that. And see we have this within a display class, which requires these two parameters. These two parameters you'll see over here, error view class, and then we call the display, which is this method, and then we have these two parameters that go into, and so based on the errors that occur, these are included within this error message, and then logged, of course. Let's see, moving on, also the proper and also I mentioned throwing an exception. So here we have an exception class here that would be thrown within a try catch statement that would basically try a block of code. If there's an error, then it would throw this exception, and that's how we propagate that to the proper error exception class or error class. On the right, you'll see it's within a switch statement where there's several cases, and within the managing crops view, it's going to try that block of code, which is fairly extensive. Manage crops view handles all the crop stuff. If there is an interrupted exception within those, such as the display crops report view, then it will throw this exception, and it would catch that here. So our game wouldn't crash, it would throw an exception that is appropriate, and then the message that we had for that particular error would be thrown. So the user would be able to see more accurately what is going on. Next, the input-output stream. There's byte stream and character stream. My understanding is that character stream essentially at its core uses byte stream, but with character stream we can process individual characters at a time instead of just the bytes associated with those that make up those characters. And this, I guess, is handy, for example, in language variances. If we're going to take our program and ship it to another country or another language, it's easier to convert with character streams versus the byte streams. Here you'll see file output stream. We create a new file output stream within a try block, and then this object output stream is the character stream is character streaming, and we see above that the output stream is utilized. In this case, we're saving a game and for storage, and then ultimately we're going to retrieve that information. If there is any issue, we have our catch with the exception, appropriate exception, and another example of the throw method to throw this exception. Hello there. I just had a quick glitch to get back to the game here. Okay, so demonstrating the game, it starts out, please enter an option. So I'm going to press 1 to enter an option. My name is Dennis. It gives a brief description here. Hello, Dennis. It gives me some game options and some feedback. First, let's view the map. Now, the map, this is earlier in the presentation, the multidimensional array that we used for printing out a map. You'll see some of these rows have just blank space and some characters to make them visually understandable, and then we're actually printing out the values of those arrays, of the array in this map. And then we have a description here, which is nice and handy, of what those locations are and who is there. The current location, 3.3 is the one I typed in, is the King's Treasury. This current location, 3.3, is King's Treasury. If we go to move to a new location, we'll push 3, the X coordinates Let's go ahead and try the let's see, the cattle field, which is 1, 3. So 1 for X, asks for Y, we'll put 3. And then now it tells us we are in the cattle field. It's good that the cattle have plenty of grass to eat. Now for the next option, that's our location. Let's go ahead and view the lists. This is the list of items, tools. We have livestock, and total feed on the ground, 262. So that's a representation of the lists. I demonstrated the move to a new location. If we move to, let's see, let's just put 3-3 again, and that would be the king's treasury. It says only Joseph and the Pharaoh are allowed. But let's go ahead and manage the crops. If we go to manage the crops, we have crops report. And this is where the time delay is earlier. So if we have any issues there, it would throw that interrupted exception, and we would be able to see the results of that. And here's some game initial information. Year number 1, 777 people, 1,000 acres are available to plant. This is how many bushels we have, 2,800, and so on and so forth. Let's go ahead and buy some acres. Let's buy 70. Well, let's go ahead and buy 10 acres. We know that they're 10 apiece, so that'll be 100 of our bushels. We don't want to sell any. We'll put 0. We must be the people, though, and so here's a time delay of some interactive stuff, of descriptions, of how to feed the people. Our attention is required to the user. Let's go ahead and put 2,100 bushels to feed the people. It's I think it's at 20 bushels per person per year. So it asks us yes, no, or make it so. If we enter make it so, it's going to do something fun. But let's push yes for right now. It says, oh, okay, you've chosen to feed 2,100 bushels to 777. How many bushels would you like to use to plant? I think that leaves us 700. For the remainder, we're trying to plant more than we have. Okay, let's just go ahead and do 77. There we go. Okay, so we lost 672 people, and there'd be 105 left. Let's see. So we have we're year number 1 still. We have 105 people this time. Let's see. We have 677 bushels in store. We've lost quite a few people. We didn't do so well at that. But let's see. Let's go ahead and view the map real quick. This our location is 3-3, and I did that because I want to go and show you the save game. Let's enter 4, and it asks us for a file name. This is the character stream writing to a file that we saw earlier. So I saved that game. Now let me go ahead and load the saved game. It asked me for a file name. Let's type Dennis, and let's go ahead and view the map. When I do that, it shows us our current location is 3-3, so we know we're back in the same game that we were, because the default the game starts out with 0-0. So that is working correctly. And let's see, we have also the manage crops view, where you see now when we go back to manage crops again, our year counter has incremented. Our people are still 105. It gives all the current levels and statistics for everything. Let's go ahead and buy another. Let's go buy 150. It says I don't have enough for that. So let's buy 7. Let's sell 4. Okay, now we must feed the people. So at this time, we need to enter a whole number for the bushels that will be distributed. I guess we can have some fun with that and just say 20 bushels. That should supply about 1 person. And now we can just put make it so, which is, I guess, a little fun thing we have here in our game. And that gives us Jean-Luc Picard, and he says you have made it so far. We can hit enter, and that will throw an exception. And what that does is just gives us the exception, but it does also process the input. So we fed 20 bushels to 105 for the year. How many bushels would we like to plant? We'll just say 1. And we have lost more people. So let's see, we're still year number 2 of the 7 years of planting. We have over 1,000 acres, and 548 bushels in store.